Everyone knows PBS Masterpiece for Downton Abbey, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Since the 70s, it's been dropping some of the best period dramas ever made, and half of them slipped right under the radar. From a Helena Bonham Carter miniseries written by Russell T Davies to a forgotten Alex Kingston romp with Daniel Craig. These are the 10 underrated PBS Masterpiece period dramas you should be watching. If you remember Crossroads at all, it's probably as the soap your grandparents watched. Cardboard sets, wooden acting, the kind of thing that never wins awards but somehow runs forever. This time, though, the story's not about Crossroads itself, but about the woman at the center of it, Noelle Gordon, played by Helena Bonham Carter. Nolly was huge in Britain in the 60s and 70s. Everybody knew her face, and when she was suddenly fired at the peak of her career, it was front-page news. Helena Bonham Carter already has a long list of iconic 20th century women under her belt: Princess Margaret, Elizabeth Taylor, Mrs. Lee Harvey Oswald, and now she adds Nolly to the collection. The series is only 3 episodes, but Russell T Davies, the guy behind Queer as Folk, It's a Sin, and of course Doctor Who, writes it with the same kind of sharpness you'd expect from him. Honestly, what makes the show work is Helena Bonham Carter. She's just as good as you'd hope. The show's funny, weirdly moving, and even with such a specific subject, it pulls you in. The only real gripe is that they don't go deeper into Nolly's earlier years, but focusing on the Crossroads era makes sense. Overall, this one's just a blast. If you know Gurinder Chadha's other films, Bend It Like Beckham, Bride and Prejudice, you'll know she can handle big stories with a lot of personality. Beecham House, though, doesn't get talked about nearly enough. Set in Delhi in 1800, you get John Beecham, ex-East India Company soldier, arriving to start fresh. Of course, he's dragging some secrets with him. The setting's great, right at that point when British and Indian cultures are about to collide in a way that changes everything. The show is mostly about the Beecham family and their new house, with the drama coming from inside the walls rather than politics, which actually makes it feel more personal than a lot of Empire shows. Critics called it the Delhi Downton Abbey, and honestly, that's pretty fair. It's nowhere near perfect. Reviews were mixed, and it never quite turned into a radical historical drama. But it's entertaining if you're into melodramatic period TV, and you get great Bollywood actors, plus some genuinely funny dialogue. The series is only 6 episodes, and unfortunately, ITV never renewed it after that cliffhanger ending. Carrie's War is one of those stories that quietly sneaks up on you. It's set at the start of World War II. Carrie and her younger brother Nick are evacuated from London to a village in Wales, ending up in the house of a strict shopkeeper and his nervous sister. What really makes the story interesting is when the kids get sent to Druid's Bottom, this mysterious manor run by a self-proclaimed witch and Mr. Evans's estranged sister. There's a little magic, a bit of first love, but it's all grounded. Nothing gets too cute. It's a solid adaptation of Nina Bodden's novel. You don't get any big stars here, but the cast is genuinely great, especially Keely Fawcett, who kind of disappeared from TV after this. It's a perfect family watch, and the BBC nails the tone from start to finish. The collection is basically about 2 brothers trying to revive a Paris fashion house after World War II, and it does not sugarcoat how rough things are, on or off the runway. Paul Sabine, the lead, wants to put Paris back on the map, but there's plenty in his own past threatening to derail everything. Not to mention the fashion world politics, the rivalries, and the occasional corpse that turns up. Visually, the show is a knockout. You get gorgeous costumes, the gritty side of post-war Paris, and a real sense of what's at stake for everyone involved. The cast is international. Tom Riley, Mamie Gummer, a bunch of British and French actors who absolutely look the part. The show's biggest strength is the authenticity. Filmed partly in France, full of details that make you feel like you're there. Enjoy the scheming, the backstabbing, the romance, and the underlying sense that everyone's fighting for survival in a world that's just barely gotten back on its feet. Louisa Layton might be one of the most overlooked underdog heroes in period drama. She starts out as an assistant cook, working in some lord's kitchen with nothing but ambition and a Cockney accent. All she wants is to be the best cook in England, and she actually pulls it off, eventually running her own hotel and serving London's elite. The series is based on the true story of Rosa Lewis, who went from poverty to running the famous Cavendish Hotel. The show doesn't smooth out her edges. Louisa is tough, determined, and more than a little intimidating. She runs her staff like a pirate captain, never losing her accent, never backing down. The setting is Edwardian London, and you really get a sense of what it took to rise up back then, especially as a woman. A classic series that still holds up. Howard's End is E.M. Forster at his best. Two sisters, Margaret and Helen Schlegel, dealing with love, money, and class in turn-of-the-century England. The 2017 adaptation is written by Kenneth Lonergan, and he actually brings something fresh to the material. Margaret is smart and idealistic, and after the death of Ruth Wilcox, she ends up entangled with Ruth's husband, Henry Wilcox, a self-made businessman with a completely different outlook. Helen, the younger sister, gets swept up in the cause of Leonard Bast, a struggling clerk with his own complicated life. The series looks fantastic. Great cast, period details on point, and it really dives into what makes the story tick without getting bogged down in old-fashioned melodrama. There's Hayley Atwell, Matthew Macfadyen, Julia Ormond. The acting is top-notch across the board. Indian Summers is set in 1932, during the dying days of the British Empire. The show is all about power, politics, and those moments when the old world order is starting to crack. It tells the story from both English and Indian perspectives. The socialites having their parties in the mountains, the local Indians starting to push for independence, and all the messiness that comes from those two worlds colliding. Julie Walters leads the cast as Cynthia Coffin, queen of the social scene, and she's surrounded by a strong group of mostly British actors. There's romance, scheming, a real sense of change hanging over everything. It's lush, well acted, and actually feels different from every other Empire show out there. Moll Flanders is a wild ride. Set in the 18th century, you've got Alex Kingston as Moll, a woman who frankly has seen everything. Born in prison, raised with gypsies, and from there, just chaos. 5 husbands, heartbreak, crime, poverty, more crime. Daniel Craig and Diana Rigg show up in supporting roles, which honestly makes the whole thing even better. The story doesn't shy away from the rough stuff. There's a fair bit of nudity and sex, so maybe don't put it on with the kids in the room. But Kingston is fantastic, and the whole show zips along thanks to writer Andrew Davies, who knows how to bring period stories to life. There are 2 versions, the complete 4-parter on Prime Video and a trimmed-down 2-parter that aired on PBS with some scenes cut for content. If you want the full story, the longer version is the way to go. Some stories just never go out of style, and The Railway Children is one of them. Nesbitt's book is a classic, and this adaptation really nails the mood. Jenny Agutter, who played the oldest child in the famous 1970 version, returns here as the mother, which is a nice touch. The story's simple. Dad disappears, Mom and the kids have to move from London to Yorkshire, and they end up living near a railway line. There's hardship, there's adventure, there's kindness, and a bit of old-fashioned life lessons. Richard Attenborough pops up as the kindly old gentleman, and the whole thing feels timeless. Even if you know exactly where it's going, the acting, costumes, and set design just make it work. Family-friendly, good for all ages, and an example of how a straightforward story can still have real impact. Last up, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, Anne Bronte's best-known novel, and honestly, one of the most powerful stories in any of the Bronte canon. It's about a mysterious widow and her son who show up in a Yorkshire village, and the entire place immediately starts gossiping. Nobody knows what she's running from, and she's not about to tell. Tara Fitzgerald plays the lead, and she's incredible, reserved, strong, and quietly intense. Toby Stephens is the young farmer who befriends her, and Rupert Graves steals scenes as the local villain. The adaptation is moody, atmospheric, and really dives into the darker parts of the story. There's romance, secrets, and a constant sense that something's not quite right. The cast is stacked with great British actors, and the script never tries to modernize the source or talk down to the audience. Another BBC classic, highly recommended, this is how romantic literature should be dramatized.